breaking news out of Canada, and it's sending shockwaves across the continent. In a stunning turn of events, Alberta has just dropped a bombshell that could change the future of North America's energy landscape. In what can only be described as a major geopolitical move, Alberta has taken drastic steps after Canada made the decision to shut down a crucial pipeline deal with the United States. But what does this mean for energy supplies? For US-Canada relations? And for the average American and Canadian citizen? Picture this: an entire region's energy future hanging by a thread, potential job losses, rising fuel prices, and a mounting pressure on both governments to navigate the fallout. Alberta, known for its vast oil sands and natural resources, is now at the heart of a dispute that could send ripples through global markets. This isn't just about pipelines, it's about the future of energy, climate policy, and how two powerful countries with strong ties are suddenly butting heads. So, what happened? And what comes next? Stay tuned as we break down the Alberta bombshell, its implications, and why you need to understand what's at stake for both Canada and the US. Alberta's energy industry has long been a cornerstone of both Canada's economy and its relationship with the United States. For decades, the province has exported vast quantities of oil and natural gas to its southern neighbor. In return, the U.S. has been a major customer, helping Alberta fuel its economy and create thousands of jobs. But in a stunning political move, this delicate energy partnership is now under threat. Earlier this week, Canada officially shut down a key pipeline deal that was expected to bring billions of dollars in energy exports to the United States. This has set off a firestorm of reactions, particularly in Alberta, where the energy sector is a vital part of the economy. In response, Alberta has fired back with an aggressive stance, signaling a potential rupture in one of North America's most significant economic ties. It's a development that could have far-reaching consequences, not just for the two countries involved, but for the global energy market as well. So why is this happening now? This is more than just a dispute over a pipeline. It's about energy policy, climate action, and economic strategy in the 21st century. The US and Canada have always been close allies, but the decision to shut down this pipeline deal represents a shift in how both countries are viewing their future energy needs. For Americans, this could mean higher gas prices and potential energy shortages. For Canadians, it's a political and economic battle that has been brewing for years. Number 1. The energy partnership. Under threat, Alberta's energy industry has been a cornerstone of the economic relationship between Canada and the United States for decades. The province boasts some of the largest oil sands reserves in the world, making it a key player in global energy markets, particularly when it comes to supplying the United States. The proposed pipeline was designed to enhance the flow of this oil and gas across the border, making the U.S. one of Alberta's biggest customers for years to come. However, with Canada's recent decision to shut down this crucial pipeline deal, Alberta's ability to supply the U.S. with energy is now at serious risk. This development could have immediate and long-term consequences for Alberta's economy. The province is highly dependent on oil revenues, with thousands of jobs in the oil and gas sector. In fact, the industry directly employs tens of thousands of Canadians, from engineers to construction workers to truck drivers. These workers and their families now face uncertainty about their futures, as the energy market is thrown into turmoil. The loss of this deal would not only affect those employed in the sector, but also result in a significant blow to Alberta's overall economic stability. The province contributes a substantial portion of Canada's GDP, and a sudden drop in oil exports could lead to higher unemployment, lower income, and slower economic growth. Alberta could also face a potential budget deficit, as oil and gas revenues account for a large share of provincial tax revenues. In the broader context, this disruption could have a cascading effect on Canada's national economy as well. Since the U.S. has been Alberta's primary customer, the loss of access to this market could force the province to look for alternative buyers. But finding new markets for its oil and gas, especially in an increasingly competitive global energy market, is no simple task. Countries like China and India may offer new opportunities, but they also come with geopolitical risks and long-term uncertainties. If Alberta cannot find a solution, it could face a protracted economic struggle that reverberates across the nation. Number 2. The political fallout in Canada. The decision to shut down the pipeline deal is not just an economic blow for Alberta. It's a highly charged political issue that has stirred up tensions across Canada. On one hand, the Canadian government, led by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, has been under immense pressure from environmentalists and climate change activists to reduce reliance on fossil fuels and invest more in renewable energy sources. Shutting down the pipeline deal is seen by some as a victory in the fight against climate change, as it aligns with Canada's ambitious environmental goals to reduce carbon emissions and transition to a greener economy. For Trudeau and his government, this is a delicate balancing act. On the one hand, they must appease environmental voters and fulfill promises made during the last election to take meaningful action on climate change. On the other hand, they must confront the reality that Alberta, a province rich in natural resources, has become a major political and economic force in Canada. The oil and gas sector is deeply embedded in Alberta's identity, and the province's government has been outspoken in its belief that Ottawa's climate policies have disproportionately impacted Alberta's economy. The political fallout is significant. Alberta's Premier, Danielle Smith, and other provincial leaders have condemned the decision to shut down the pipeline deal, framing it as an attack on Alberta's economic well-being and a betrayal of the province's workers. Smith has even suggested that Alberta may take legal action against the federal government, arguing that Ottawa is infringing on the province's rights to manage its natural resources and make its own economic decisions. This standoff has created a deep political divide in Canada. In Alberta, many see the federal government's actions as a direct affront to their livelihood and a failure to support a province that has been a major contributor to Canada's prosperity. The tensions could also fuel the separatist movement in Alberta, with some political figures calling for greater autonomy or even independence from Canada, should the federal government continue its policies perceived as harmful to the province's economic interests. At the same time, Trudeau and the federal government have a responsibility to appease other provinces and voters who are more concerned with the environmental impacts of oil extraction and the need to transition to a green economy. This is especially true as Canada faces mounting pressure from international climate agreements and its own environmental targets. The political fallout from this decision could have long-lasting implications for Trudeau's leadership and his government's ability to govern effectively. In essence, the shutdown of this pipeline deal has ignited a battle over Canada's future direction, whether it will continue to rely on fossil fuels or take a firm step toward a cleaner, more sustainable energy policy. This debate will likely dominate Canadian politics for the foreseeable future, with Alberta's reaction playing a central role in shaping the national conversation about energy, the economy, and climate change. Number 3. U.S. energy security at risk. The United States has long relied on energy imports from Canada, and Alberta in particular has been a cornerstone of this relationship. The province's vast reserves of oil and natural gas, especially its oil sands, have made it one of the largest foreign suppliers of energy to the U.S. Alberta's oil is crucial for U.S. refineries, particularly in the Midwest and Gulf Coast regions, where it is processed and then distributed across the country. With the cancellation of the pipeline deal, this vital energy source is now in jeopardy. The most immediate impact of this shutdown will be felt in terms of higher energy prices for American consumers. Oil prices, which are already subject to volatility due to global market dynamics, could spike even further as the U.S. loses access to this reliable, relatively cheap source of crude. Gasoline prices, which have a direct impact on daily life for American consumers, could rise significantly as a result of the loss of Alberta's oil exports. For many Americans, particularly those in lower-income households, an increase in fuel prices is not just an inconvenience, it's a serious financial burden. Moreover, the loss of Canadian oil could exacerbate the U.S.'s energy security concerns. While the U.S. has significantly increased domestic oil production in recent years, particularly with the rise of shale oil, there are still significant dependencies on imports to meet demand. The loss of Alberta's oil would be keenly felt in refining centers along the U.S. Gulf Coast, where the vast majority of Canada's oil is processed. These refineries are built to handle heavy crude like the kind extracted from Alberta's oil sands, and losing this supply could force refineries to turn to alternative sources, such as oil from the Middle East or Latin America. These sources are often more expensive and come with greater geopolitical risks, potentially affecting the stability of oil supplies in the U.S. The U.S. energy sector is also concerned about the long-term impact of this development on its infrastructure. The pipeline deal was a major part of a broader strategy to ensure consistent, reliable access to Canadian oil for years to come. If the deal is permanently canceled, the U.S. will need to make significant investments in infrastructure to secure alternative supplies. This could involve upgrading existing pipelines, building new ones, or increasing domestic oil production. However, this would take years, and in the short term, the U.S. could face disruptions to its energy flow. In addition, the political fallout from the shutdown of this deal will undoubtedly affect U.S.-Canada relations. The two countries have long been seen as close allies, particularly in terms of trade and energy. With the cancellation of this pipeline deal, that relationship is now under strain, with both sides likely to engage in a war of words and perhaps even economic retaliation. The U.S. may look to apply pressure on Canada diplomatically, either by demanding that the deal be revived or by seeking alternative energy sources that don't rely on Canadian exports. On the other hand, Canada might retaliate by reducing the amount of oil it exports to the U.S. or by shifting its focus to other markets. Especially in Asia, the energy security implications of this move cannot be overstated. For the U.S., the loss of Alberta's oil exports is not just an economic issue, it's a matter of national security. The U.S. relies on a stable and affordable energy supply to maintain its global influence, and disruptions in energy flows can have far-reaching effects on everything, from manufacturing to transportation to military operations. With this pipeline deal on the chopping block, the future of U.S. energy security looks increasingly uncertain. Number 4. The global energy market impact. The fallout from Canada's decision to shut down the U.S. pipeline deal won't be confined to North America. The global energy market is deeply interconnected, and any disruption in energy flows between two major economies like Canada and the U.S. can send ripples around the world. This situation is a clear example of how energy policies in one country can have far-reaching implications for the entire globe. First, if Alberta loses its primary export route to the U.S., it may have to look for alternative markets for its oil. While Canada has made efforts to diversify its energy exports in recent years, particularly by targeting markets in Asia, the shift away from the U.S. would not be a simple or immediate process. Countries like China and India, which have seen growing demand for oil, could become potential customers for Alberta's oil. However, these markets come with their own set of challenges. For one, Alberta's oil is particularly heavy, and not all refineries around the world are equipped to process it. In fact, China and India would need to invest in specialized infrastructure to handle this type of crude oil, which could take years to develop. Additionally, geopolitical tensions could complicate Alberta's efforts to pivot to Asian markets. China, in particular, has increasingly flexed its geopolitical muscle in the energy sector, using its control over energy resources as a tool to influence global affairs. For Alberta, this could mean navigating a more complex and less predictable energy trade environment where supply chains and prices could be subject to the whims of Chinese political agendas. While this might sound like a viable alternative, the shift toward Asian markets would require Alberta to adjust its energy strategy significantly and potentially face more volatility in terms of pricing and market access. On a broader scale, the shutdown of the pipeline deal could also affect the global supply of oil, especially in the context of rising demand for energy as economies emerge from the pandemic and resume growth. The world is already experiencing supply chain disruptions, and the loss of a major oil supplier like Alberta could lead to further price hikes and inflation. Oil prices, which are often driven by geopolitical factors, could surge as countries scramble to secure new sources of energy, pushing up costs for consumers worldwide. This would affect not just oil, but the prices of other goods and services that rely on transportation and energy costs. Another consequence of this move could be the acceleration of the global energy transition. As countries like the U.S. and Canada wrestle with the complexities of balancing fossil fuel reliance with the urgent need to address climate change, global energy markets are becoming more dynamic. The closure of the pipeline deal may prompt other countries to reevaluate their energy sources, further driving the push toward renewables. If Canada's oil is no longer an option for the U.S., other countries might seek to ramp up their own renewable energy production in order to reduce dependency on oil and gas. This could accelerate the global shift toward cleaner energy, potentially transforming energy markets in ways that were previously unimaginable. In the grand scheme of things, the impact of this situation extends far beyond the U.S. and Canada. It speaks to the fragility of global energy supply chains and how disruptions in one part of the world can have cascading effects on the entire system. Whether it's through rising prices, shifts in supply chains, or geopolitical maneuvering. The shutdown of this pipeline deal could serve as a wake-up call for countries around the world to consider the long-term sustainability and security of their energy systems. With energy demand expected to rise, the decisions made today will reverberate through global markets for years to come. Number 5. The road ahead. What's next? As Alberta's government and the Canadian federal administration find themselves in the middle of a heated standoff over the shutdown of the U.S. pipeline deal, the road ahead remains uncertain and fraught with political, economic, and environmental challenges. Both sides are at a crossroads, and how they proceed will not only shape the future of energy relations between Canada and the United States, but could also have lasting implications on both countries' domestic and international policies. The immediate response from Alberta has been one of anger and defiance. Premier Danielle Smith and other provincial leaders have strongly criticized the federal government's decision to cancel the pipeline deal, claiming it disregards Alberta's economic interests and undermines the livelihoods of thousands of workers in the oil and gas sector. Alberta's oil sands, one of the largest reserves of crude oil in the world, have been a major contributor to both provincial and national prosperity for decades. For Alberta, this shutdown represents more than just a disruption to their energy exports. It's an attack on their way of life and their economic foundation. The province has indicated that it will not sit idly by. Legal action has been mentioned as a possible recourse, with Alberta's leadership signaling their intent to challenge the federal government in court, claiming that Ottawa has overstepped its constitutional boundaries by interfering with the provincial government's right to manage its natural resources. This legal battle could take years to unfold, prolonging the uncertainty surrounding Alberta's energy future and raising questions about the power balance between provincial and federal governments in Canada. The outcome of such a legal case could also influence future federal-provincial relations in Canada, especially when it comes to natural resources, which have long been a flashpoint in Canadian politics. If Alberta succeeds in its legal challenge, it could set a precedent that significantly alters how energy policies are crafted across the country. If it loses, however, the province may face even greater constraints on its ability to control its own economic